Special edition of POLOTIKI, brought to you by News 24. My name is Mahlatse Mahlase. It's day 5 of the ANC's National Elective Conference. It's supposed to be the last day of conference, but of course, the big question here is, when will it all draw to an end? There are still some major issues still at play here, disagreements, no clear direction of where the party is going, and at the heart of it is that matter of the 63 or 68 disputed votes. We have confirmation that marathon meetings have continued with the steering committee trying to find a solution in terms of this matter. We know that there were people who voted, even though they did not appear on the voters' roll. Their votes were cast aside into an envelope, quarantined, as sources have told us. But now the issue is that will they be included in that final tally for the results of the Secretary General position? As things stand, Ace Magashule, the current chairperson of the Free State, is now the Secretary General of the ANC. But we know that Senzo Mchunu, the former KwaZulu-Natal provincial chair, is fighting this. Well, not him himself, but his supporters are saying that they want those votes included, and if they're included, it will overturn the results that made Ace Magashule the Secretary General. It's a big fight. This is the engine of the ANC, and you know it's going to be, we have already said this is Cyril Ramaphosa's big test before he even walks into Luthuli House and sits comfortably in that presidential seat. Of course, voting for the National Executive Committee has been concluded. The delegates spent the night voting for the 80-member body. This is the all-powerful National Executive Committee. It is the second highest, it is the decision-making body between conferences, and both sides, the Cyril Ramaphosa camp and the defeated presidential candidate Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, are hoping to dominate that committee because of its importance. And we've seen the tensions that have arisen between the president and the National Executive Committee. Essentially, President Jacob Zuma surviving 2 motions to recall him because he had supporters inside that National Executive Committee. We're going to be talking about all of this and more throughout this hour of our special edition of POLOTIKI. We are live from the Nasrec Expo Center. Let's get a little bit in terms of the details. What is the latest from the conference? And as usual, this time around, I must say, I am being joined by a very exhausted News 24 journalist, Sidi Madia. I'm sure you're very happy that we are nearing the end of this conference.
Oh, absolutely. I can't wait for Cyril Ramaphosa's final speech, for the new president to close conference, for us to dissect what that means and what he has said and look at his plans, and then go into festive season, be like other children and enjoy December. We'll worry about the ANC hopefully again in January. I'm very excited that it's finally over.
We were joking that the ANC cannot deny us Christmas. No.
They cannot. We cannot be stuck here over an issue that they cannot resolve. We deserve Christmas, yeah.
Siri, of course, we have had no official word on what the decision by the steering committee is about the 63 or 68. I don't know if we should call them missing, because they're not missing. They are there.
They're actually in an envelope.
They're in an envelope. The issue is, will they be included in that final tally for the Secretary General position? What are our sources telling us?
The difficulty is that you're not in the room. The difficulty is that when the ANC communicates, you've got people like the spokesperson, outgoing spokesperson, Zizi Kota, saying, you know, if disputes are raised, they're dealt with in such and such a way. Has a dispute been raised? If they're raised, they're dealt with. So they're not willing to go and take into their confidence and tell you too much. But we do know that there were lawyers on standby. We do know that a grouping did go to court, but then the decision to go forward with the court matter application then was kind of stalled. You know, they kind of hung, because what they ultimately need, Matlat, is a political solution. And that's what people have been talking about. If you remember Supra Mahumapelo saying they're going to threaten anarchy, they're going to threaten a revote rather, in order to try and get a political solution. And from what I'm hearing is that that's what's been reached, you know, that Ace Magashule will remain SG. The question is whether or not they can disarm him and make him a lame duck SG, if you may. That's kind of what the hopes are, would be that he doesn't feel powerful, that he's disempowered, and that the power must lie with Cyril Ramaphosa being the CEO versus the COO, which is Ace Magashule. So I think that's what they're going to do. And again, all eyes are on that NEC. Delegates had been voting throughout the night. The big question is, who's going to have their members in that NEC, dominating that NEC, because that's how you win arguments. This is the highest decision-making body in between conferences. This is where President Jacob Zuma's future lies. This is where it will lie. This is where the decisions will be made as to whether he will be able to deliver the State of the Nation in February or not. That's where that lies. So whichever one out of the different factions that wants to win, that battle rages on.
Of course, as TD is telling us there, it has been quite difficult to get any confirmation or to get any the ANC to tell us what exactly have they decided in terms of these disputed votes. Journalists earlier were able to ask Jeff Khadebe, who is part of the steering committee for this conference, on what that decision was, but this is all that we're able to get.
We have received a report from the Electoral Commission at the plenary session this
can
morning
go
at 9 o'clock. The Electoral Commission that are responsible for this conference are going to be able to give us a report. I think let's wait for 9 o'clock when the Electoral Commission, led by Sindiso Mfenyana, will be outlining the issues at stake.
That was Jeff Khadebe. Of course, we have to call him former National Executive Committee member because the NEC has been dissolved, but confirming that he is part of the conference steering committee. What we do know is that that committee is made up of provincial secretaries. The Deputy Secretary General, Jesse Duarte, is also part of that steering committee. And from what Jeff Khadebe is telling us is that the Electoral Commission, which should have the final say in terms of how voting goes, will give a report back to plenary. Plenary is when all of the delegates are seated in that hall. That is the plenary that we are talking about. But of course, the delegates here have told us that if whatever decision that the Electoral Commission makes or the steering committee makes, the final decision is with the delegates. So we are expecting quite a heated debate, TD.
On a number of issues, actually. You know, that's the other strange thing about today. We're at the final day. So many things have been delayed. They're lagging behind as far as the program is concerned. But what they actually need is time in plenary today, time to debate very crucial issues, including the issue of the 63 votes. If all 63 versus the 15, because people have been arguing that it's actually 15 that are legitimate, but if all 63 are legitimate votes, and if all 63 change the dynamics, and suddenly actually it wasn't Ace Makashule who had won, but Senzo Mchunu, when they take that to plenary, that will be a big fight. Senzo's people want to see him become SG. So the question is, how do they then deal with it? Which is why they needed to come to some sort of conclusion, resolution by themselves outside of the delegates. That would be a war zone. You would tell plenary, turn plenary into a war zone.
And what we've basically been seeing is that the two camps, the President Cyril Ramaphosa and the defeated presidential candidate Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, what they tend to do is every morning they then meet with the delegates and then kind of brief them of this is how you must all march together when we get to that plenary. Yesterday we saw David Makura basically telling the delegates in Ramaphosa's camp that we are saying that they have to include those votes, suggesting that they are credible votes and they must be included. You have talked about Supra Mahumapelo saying, if they dare do that, we have to start from, we have to start from day one.
Can you imagine this thing starting all over again? And you can't walk away because your job is to cover this. There are many caucuses. And funny enough, I took a walk to the other side of the media center yesterday afternoon, just kind of tired because you kind of wait. It's a waiting game, and it's quite exhausting just to sit and wait. And I took a walk to the other end, and as I was sitting under a shade, I could hear Amanda Viva from a distance. And when I asked one of the delegates passing by what's going on, and they said, no, it's an NDZ caucus that's gathering in the afternoon. So absolutely, they meet with their delegates and say, this is the marching line, this is what you need to do. As you know, the issue around the NEC, where they were voting for additional members, each of them had sheets. These are the people that we want to see populate in that particular NEC. So that's what they're doing in between. While the steering committee meets and they deliberate issues, the leaders are telling their caucuses, be prepared to fight. This is what we want, this is what you must demand. And when you go to plenary, you'll hear the different provinces, somebody going, this is what I want, I don't want to hear anything else. Madam Chair, when Balagambeto was chair, this is what I want. So different ideas and voices coming from different provinces, of course, in alliance with what their particular slate had wanted.
That is actually quite true. So if you are just joining us, we are broadcasting live from the Nazareth Expo Center. It's supposed to be, and I use the word supposed to be deliberately here because it is supposed to be day 5 and the final day for the ANC elective conference. But, you know, we don't know when things will draw to an end. Our News 24 journalist, Tidi Madia, earlier on tried to get some answers from the spokesperson, Zizi Kodwa. Let's take a listen.
We have no plans to be here beyond today.
Ralph
Today,
must come.
immediately when the plenary convenes around 10, we will get a report back from the elections, for example, about the voting of the additional 80 members of the NEC, which will be followed immediately again by a report back from commissions in terms of policy of the ANC. Between the closed session, there will be media briefings in terms of the resolutions from the commissions. After that, we'll adopt a declaration, which will be followed by the official closing address of President Ramaphosa, which we'll expect late in the afternoon, about 4 or 5. We expect the President to close. Like I said, we have no plans to be here beyond the 20th of December.
There have been talks, a lot of reports and unconfirmed reports really, around an impasse around 63 votes, some say 68. Last night some was saying 15. Can you just give us a bit of clarity on what actually transpired? The steering committee was in a meeting for most of the day. What came off of that particular meeting?
It's all speculative talk. There's been speculative talk just also in terms of numbers, 68, 15 and 63. The steering committee runs the conference. And the steering committee, should there be any issue, whether it's a formal dispute that has been lodged, they will report to the plenary. If there is an irregularity in terms of the outcomes and numbers, they will report to the plenary. So if there's an issue that somebody would have launched a formal complaint with our IEC, that IEC report will be presented this morning when we meet again before the presentation of the additional members.
So the disputes that were lodged will be part of the plenary today?
Unless we confirm, I can't confirm even if there was a formal dispute lodged. I'm just saying in terms of the process, that if there would be any dispute lodged, and that will be dealt with from a point of view of leadership of this conference by the steering committee, provide leadership, and then it will report to the plenary.
You can't confirm whether a formal dispute was lodged, Zizi?
Yes, I can't confirm that.
Okay, so that's how it will play out today. In terms of time frames, though, what are we looking at?
We're looking at plenary convening at 10. Anything after every item of the closing of the conference and then is expected to follow after that.
That was the ANC national spokesperson, Zizi Kodwa, speaking there to our News 24 political journalist, Tidi Madia. Very few times that Zizi has like one-word answers. And
It's
that's
very
all you were
rare.
getting there.
I was completely stumped. I was like, Zizi, you've got to give me something to work with. And he had nothing to give. He had nothing to give. He was like, that's how it works. And he'll give me a blank stare. I'm like, this is very unusual, Zizi. but that tells you the kind of times we're living in and the kind of ANC we're covering right now.
Right now. And of course, joining us on Polotiki is our resident analyst, Ralph Mateja. Ralph, 24 hours of silence from the ANC on a crucial matter like this one that could have an impact on the final outcome of the top 6 elections. They've handled it very poorly.
I think CD brought it out from Zizi there that even Zizi can spin this. You know, there is he can come through on this. I think that the NC is on a crisis management mode. That they can no longer deny that, and I think that the communication is managed very tightly because there is an attempt to synchronize what is happening within the steering committee as they are dealing with these votes, lost or disputed votes, and at the same time they are trying to manage information. But there is something that they are not being able to do very well. Their members are just leaking. There is just this misinformation that keeps on getting on. Stories keep changing. They are going to accept Mahashule and so forth. And now you hear that the NDZ caucus, as Sidi was mentioning, I wonder, should there still be an NDZ caucus? I mean, this thing worries me, Mahlatsi, how they are going to leave this conference. Are they going to leave in the same manner they came in? Because there is a danger here. If they leave here with an NDZ caucus that is still believed to exist, what is it that that caucus will be doing going forward? What are their strategic, their medium-term, maybe their short-term strategies? Are they going to accept what we have seen, or should we expect to see some form of a political comeback what way is it going to be? Are we going to see the new top 6 leadership actually having a crisis of legitimacy? Because you know how ANC members do. They know how to undermine each other in the public space. So it is very unclear as to exactly how they are going to come out of this conference.
Look, I mean, I would like us to speak about that NDZ caucus and whether it still exists, especially following on what the Women's League said yesterday. But essentially, does it not also demonstrate that at this current moment, you do have a leadership vacuum? Because yes, you have a top 6 that is elected, but it has not necessarily already assumed its role. And that is why nobody is able to give direction, to say, this is what we should be saying to the media. I mean, even Zizi Kodwa, essentially, he's a gone, he's no longer the spokesperson, Ralph.
I mean, I've been to a few ANC elective conferences. This is the top 6 that needs a PR from day one. They really need a public relations approach as to how they are going to deal with this. You are right there, you're correct there about the leadership vacuum. The problem is that this very same top 6 cannot actually step in and lead, because it is just being disputed from they can't get the different factions to coalesce. They can't preside upon different factions. It is because they are being disputed. Already they do have a legitimacy problem. And I think for the first time, the NC, when they come out of a conference, they have to sell their top 6. That is what they have to do. They have to sell it not only to the general public in South Africa, but they have to sell this thing to ANC members themselves. I mean, this caucus, the Women's League, as you are mentioning, the Women's League feel very much betrayed, and no one knows exactly what are they planning to do. The thing is that NC members now, they are so jaded. Those who feel that they have not secured favorable results, they are so jaded that I hope the spirit of Christmas will preside upon them in a way that they do not go into machination and directly maneuver to undermine the new leadership. I hope in the spirit of Christmas they go merry, jolly, go enjoy the custard and some jelly, think about the longer terms of the country. Do not get into skirmishes. I hope that they get into that spirit.
Somebody actually joked that they hope that the annual Christmas party that happens at Nkandla, some people actually shouldn't go there. They must find another venue together so that they could be a united voice. Sidi, you wanted to come in there?
Absolutely. I'm listening to Ralph saying, you know, this is what he hopes, that they put the country first and think about, they must think long term. Part of the struggle, listening to the Women's League yesterday, is that they're not thinking long term. They didn't think long term with their NDZ campaign. They failed to think about what needs to be done in the future. That's something that you're seeing all the time with the ANC. But also, Ralph, with the fight for resources and proximity, the country, unfortunately, the country is the victim. We are the collateral damage in all of this. And so I don't actually see merry jolliness. In fact, I see them going back to battling it out still, particularly unless the NEC battle is won. Then maybe then they'll retreat and start thinking of new strategies and trying to pretend or to work towards unity. I think we'll still have caucuses at least until the NEC. Depending on who dominates the NEC, you'll see people doing interesting things. I remember watching Pule Mabe, who was a staunch NDZ campaigner. When they knew they had lost, you know, you saw Nkosana looking completely glum, and Cyril couldn't hide his smile. He couldn't help it. Pule Mabe, who was one of Cyril's detractors, walking up to Cyril and asking for a selfie.
I saw that moment.
and I think when the NEC is dominated by the one faction or the other, you start seeing the losers, positioning themselves.
Yeah.
So that's where unity might come from. That's where the jolly so-called merriment might even come from, is that people will know, well, I need to be nice to those people because I might get a job, I might get a tender. So that's what we're going to start seeing, that merriment there.
Yeah, and we are talking about this battle for Nasrec, as we are calling it, and this time around it's the battle for the National Executive Committee of the ANC. Let's talk about the ANC Women's League and what happened yesterday. I mean, it was difficult to draw it out of them, but eventually they admitted that, you know, the men used them, but have they thrown them out?
They have made themselves available for use. And I think they've got themselves to blame for this. First of all, they have had a candidate imposed upon them. I believe that if there was a democratic processes within the NC Women's League to deal with as to who is the rightful women, if suppose they had agreed on Lindwe Sisulu, for example, as the presidential hopeful, or maybe even supported her within a deputy position, I think they would have made much better. They would have at least achieved something from this conference. they bet on one single horse that they did not even process properly. They did not even weigh as to who is the stronger one. So they've got themselves to blame. They've made themselves available for use. Let's see how they realign around what has happened. I don't know whether are they going to now defend AC's presence in the top 6, because this top 6 is going to be a heavy contest. We don't know much as to how the NEC is going to shape up. You have a possibility that you might have the NEC that is going to give the top 6 a tough time. One way or another, the process of decision making within the NEC is going to be longer, it's going to be more tense because of this misalignment within the party.
But Sidi, let's talk about the Women's League. I mean, could we see them shifting alliance? I mean, one of the weaknesses of the Cyril Ramaphosa campaign was that he didn't have the official structures in terms of the league actively campaigning for him. The Women's League, Youth League were in Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's corner. The Veterans League was a weak body. They only just had an elective conference. So, and at the end, they couldn't really bring all that they could in terms of the energy for the campaign.
Absolutely. I think the Women's League needs some time. You know, honestly, needs time to recover from what's happened. They feel betrayed. They feel completely hard done by. We heard reports and saw really some of them having meltdowns and unable to articulate their emotions after the results. So they genuinely expected a favorable outcome. But for most of us watching it, I didn't understand how that's what they thought they had in the bag. I couldn't get it, but they did. So I think they need to go back to the drawing board. That's what they kept telling us yesterday. Lindy was really saying we need to go back and look at our own strategies, and that's part of what they need to do. But I also think I don't see this leadership with Batabile Dlamini at the helm then wanting to almost go back to Cyril, you know, and saying, listen, we are here for you, we'll work with you, we'll realign ourselves. I don't see that. I think arrogance and egos are also part and parcel of the problems. I don't think they're able to do that, particularly if they genuinely believe they're correct. Then it's not easy to give in. But it again goes back to the issue I was saying about resources and proximity. I think that's the only thing that might make them change their minds.
But guys, we have to talk about this current leadership of the ANC Women's League. We know how they came to power already. Angie Motshekga, who was the president before Batabile Dlamini, said at that Galaga conference that there were men who had a hand in our elective conference, and then we knew that it was the Premier League, Ace Magashule, Didi Mabuza, and who was the KZN chairperson, who were part of ensuring that Batabile Dlamini and this current leadership emerge. And now they feel betrayed. I mean, to have those words said by the Women's League, it must have been painful.
Indeed, Matlati, they feel betrayed. They made wrong bets. They put all their eggs in one basket. Why couldn't they, one way or another, try to push Lindy?
That's a question they
couldn't
answer.
Why not? Like,
That's
why couldn't they do that? Why did they cut the whole thing into a zero sum? We get what we want or nothing. Had they split their loyalty across the two women, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who in my mind appears to have been imposed upon them, and also maybe if they had bet on Lindiwe Sulu, it would have helped. But Angie Motshekga, I don't think she's the person who can talk about this. It all started with her as well. She's the one who started demonstrating that it is possible actually to mortgage the reputation of the league in the interest of protecting President Jacob Zuma. They did that.
In Polokwane.
They cashed their political capital much early. They misinvested, and that is why they've got no credibility as we speak now. And what Batabile Dlamini did was only to escalate what Angie Motshekga started back there. And also her survival as a member of cabinet, as a presiding on the Department of Education, it is because she has used the muscle of the league to survive instead of pursuing issues that has got to do with women. It is quite shocking. I mean, yesterday we were speaking to Stella Daben Abraham, a young, brilliant, intelligent woman who clearly has got no respect of the ANC Women's League. I mean, she was being very polite there. She said, I'm not a member when there are bigger issues. Clearly, she's got a problem with where they took that. They cannot inspire the Women's League. So, you are right. They need to take a step back. They need to, before they quickly try to save their jobs and try to find a space within the new leadership, they need to take a step back and understand that if they do things right, they are a very powerful lobby within the ANC.
I think they fail to see that. They consistently fail to see their own power. But I also think the answer lies in almost getting rid of its current crop of leaders. Yesterday they were asked at the media briefing, you have an NGC next year. If you're asked to step down, will you do it? Of course, that's not a consideration they're willing to have. But truth be told, the only way towards maybe resuscitating the NC Women's League is to have different people at the helm. It's to not have Batabile Dlamini be the face of it, to not have those women answering to what they understand about the female role. At some point, they dismiss female CEOs and decision makers. How do you do that? How do you dismiss one sector if you're fighting for women across the board? I don't think they understand what their role is and what they're fighting for per se.
I think there is a good case to fire the leadership now because they failed to deliver now. What's the best? I mean, they failed. They've admitted on cameras that you know, they failed. It means they did not have a good strategy. So what is the best thing? If I go to a conference like this, Mahlatsi, I'm representing a distinct lobby group with an identity, and I failed to deliver on that. I should ask to be relieved of my responsibility. What is the best? The Women's League cannot rehabilitate itself under Batabile Dlamini. That's just very clear.
So, not very kind comments there for the ANC Women's League under the leadership of Batabile Dlamini. And of course, some have suggested that her future could hang in the balance when the ANC Women's League holds their National General Council. But, you know, the big fight that is currently on is over the NEC. Voting has been completed, but both sides will be looking to see how many of their members that they can depend on will make it to the NEC. So there's been lists distributed by both the Cyril Ramaphosa camp and also the Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma camp. And I would like us to just talk a little bit with our guests about, you know, the people that are appearing on those lists. And we will try and bring up some of the lists so that you also get to see who's there. Some of the lists might be just before nominations was actually concluded. But the one that we're seeing here is, of course, for ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa. And interestingly enough, number 3, we've got Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma in that list. I mean, it will be important for them to bring her in to show that they're reconciliatory, Ralph.
Certainly, they have to reach out to her, and then she has got a great deal of, you know, she's a manager. She knows. Remember, Mahlatsi, this is the woman who wrote that report. If my memory serves me well, before the, I think it was the 2009 election, NDZ, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, she wrote a report about the rigging of the process of electing councillors.
Choosing
And
councillors,
I think that she knows. That report comes out very clear, showing the process of vote buying, which actually is what the same allegation came out here. So she understands the party very well, and I think if she's still willing to serve, I think she still needs to go back there and try to help. And the thing is that she has never been a factionalist. We were all stunned when the whole thing started with her candidature and so forth. She has never been a factionalist. She has served 3 different presidents of the ANC. So I think she has got such wealth of experience that they need her within the NEC.
The other interesting name there, of course, and the one that's seemingly doing very well has been that of Ronald Lamola. I mean, this is a guy who was shunned by his own comrades at the ANC Youth League. And Tidi and I, before we worked together at News 24, we were at the ANC Youth League conference, which was in Midrand, and he cut such a lonely figure there.
He was heartbroken. Mahlatsi, you and I actually ended up with him that evening, having a conversation about how betrayed he felt by the movement. But the one thing Ronald Lamola said even then is that he would never turn his back on the ANC. He would go back to his branch and work for his branch. But you know what? From going back to his branch, he's worked his way back to being a very relevant character back in the ANC. From being a staunch anti-Zuma man, saying that Zuma must go, he's made the call several times, a man of his convictions, a man of principles, coming up at number 1 on the list. He is an important player. He's the comeback kid. When I speak to young people, they place so much hope in Ronald Lamola. Young people are very unhappy about the slates. They've been complaining about how the top 6 is so old.
Pensioners.
Pensioners who they believe have no interest and don't understand the issues of the youth. South Africa is an ever youthful country, and they were saying to me, but look, there's Ronald, and that's where their hopes and inspiration lies. So there's a lot on Ronald's shoulders going forward. There's a lot of hope that he will become one of the people who rescues the movement. So Ronald's name is quite critical. People want to see what he does for the movement going forward.
Quite interesting there. I think he will contribute towards a meaningful you know, this generational mix. It has been used to reward people for, you know, the support that they've provided to certain leaders. But I think that if he goes, if they get him within the NEC, maybe even in cabinet subsequently, because he's a thinker, and I think that maybe that generational mix that they're talking about, they could achieve it at least meaningfully.
Some people have actually said that David Mabuza is preparing him for the chairperson of Mpumalanga because he's now in national office. But of course, a young man who, you know, has not been about proximity. We've seen him, he's got his own law practice and continues to work, you know, even shunned by the ANC. But let's continue looking at the NEC list that we have received. Of course, these are the ones distributed by the various camps. The final nomination list was actually put forward, but this one is again the one of Cyril Ramaphosa. It's the same one that we had a little bit earlier. Interesting. People that we expected: Praveen Gordhan is there, Mondli Gugubele, Derek Hanekom, Mcebisi Jonas. It would be his first stint, I think, in the NEC, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
Yeah.
As well as Monty. What I think is interesting about this list, Matlatsi, is that David Makura's name had come up, and I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but David Makura has turned down the nomination, saying that he wants to focus on Gauteng. Of course, he's expected to take over from Paul Mashatile, who's now at national office. He was the deputy chairperson in Gauteng. Expectations are that David Makura will become the chair of Gauteng, and what David Makura is hoping to do is to try keep ANC, Gauteng ANC, come 2019. That's his big focus. You know, Gauteng has always been at odds with national government under President Jacob Zuma. They have a president that they want. So David Makura, from my understanding, said no, he's not available to serve the NEC. His focus has got to be Gauteng. He's got to try and make sure that they do not lose Gauteng. As you know, Gauteng is actually at the brink. They've lost several municipalities there, and they're hoping to make sure that they arrest that, that process come 2019.
You know, earlier on, we did a story on the ANC Women's League's own nomination list, and I could not help myself. I mean, there were the likes of Ellen Chabalala. I'm sure our viewers remember Ellen Chabalala. She was the one that had to unceremoniously leave the SABC. She was the chair of the board. We are still waiting for the qualifications to show up.
Look, they need to get it right within the NEC. In the past, being within the NEC, they did not require people with technical abilities and people who understand things and people who can think, you know, people who can actually, you know, assist the party strategically. But now they need to understand the opposition is after them, no doubt about it. They've made blunders in government that they need to correct, and certainly they know what it means if the NEC is a lame duck in relation to the presidents and how they deal with the top six and so forth. They know all the consequences, so they need to get the right people within the NEC, because see, I think it is the nerve center there. It's no longer as ceremonial as it used to be. You need the likes of Praveen Gordhan, because that is the only way you are going to be able to make sure that you put the top six in line and there is credibility within the party.
You wanted to add
but
something?
this NEC has the likes of Carl Niehaus.
Yes, I was about to say your favorite person.
How does Carl become my favorite?
Look, it's, this conference, look at the top six, okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And within the NEC as well, you are going to find very unsavory characters. You are always, but at least within the, have at least 40 people who, if someone stops them across the street to talk about their party, they can put a good word so they can have a conversation.
But let me quickly say this. Let's move away from Carl Niehaus. Let me say this. Speaking to people, some of the ANC's delegates and my own sources, they speak about how critical it is to have the right mix of people. So you're correct. Maybe there might be some unsavory characters, but you can't have a Carl Niehaus. I mean, let's not go that far. But but people are speaking about how critical it is to have an NEC that's stronger, saying that the previous NEC embarrassed the ANC, failed to act, was scared of Jacob Zuma, and did not do what it was appointed to do, saying the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa specifically as president, needs a strong ANC that's brave. You know, people said, yeah, President Jacob Zuma had strikers. These are the likes of Nomvula Mokonyane, Kebi Mapatswe, ANC Youth League President, Colin Mayine, Figile Mbalula, who were the loudmouths, who weren't scared to insult the people like Naledi Pando, who would be scared to speak out. And if you think about it, President Jacob Zuma survived not because they ever went to a vote. They didn't. He survived because his strikers would attack everybody else in the room and kill debate. So Ramaphosa needs to have some strikers on his team. They need to have strong people who are not scared. When a third, like a recount is made, they need people to go, sure, let's go, let's go. That's what they need.
I'm trying to think who would be that striker.
I'm betting that because if you are looking at what has happened under President Jacob Zuma, the NEC, you're talking about those strikers. They're howlers, those people.
Yeah,
but the howlers have worked in debates in the ANC.
But the tradition has to change. You need thinkers. You need people. You need the NEC that where you can find maybe 100 versions of radical economic transformation, showing people have been thinking.
But you know where the problem lies?
Shouting people down.
I agree with you 100% that they need thinkers. However, the tradition is not going to change just like that. No tradition just quickly transitions into something else.
The president can actually bring it together in terms of that. So we now do have the ANC Women's League NEC list that was distributed before this National Elective Conference. Of course, over 200 people nominated for the NEC, but only 80 can make it to that list. I mean, we're now looking at that list, and, you know, I tried to count in terms of women how many of them had actually dominated. They had dominated, but what I found interesting, if I remember very well, I can't read quite clearly, I don't think they had put Cyril on that list. I think one of the stories we wrote was that there is just absolutely no love for the ANC Women's League for Cyril. They don't even consider him for the NEC.
The argument on their part was that his name never came up. Nobody ever considered
like
that maybe
we've never thought about him, about that. Look, the question of the quota, Matati, I think there is a quota for the NEC. I think they're saying that they're 50 or 55%. And I think, I think that will help. But still, it does not mean that you have got to take bad people and just, you know, just fill the positions and so forth. But the quota, you know, that issue of women, maybe the quota, if they get credible women to make it into that NEC, maybe it will help.
You know, this is the big battle for Nasrec that is continuing, which is the fight for who makes it to the ANC NEC. Just to explain to our viewers a little bit, so the ANC NEC is the highest decision-making body between conferences. It is made up of the top 6, and then of course the 80 members that will be elected today, and then of course you have the provincial secretaries and the provincial chairpersons of all 9 provinces, but also the Youth League, the Veterans League, and the Women's League, then all make up that National Executive Committee. And this is why this is quite a fierce battle. We talked about the top 6, that is done, still has its own problems, but now that we are waiting for those results for the 80, the additional members of the National Executive Committee. Before we move on though, you know, one of the unfortunate things I think about what happened with President Jacob Zuma is that you now had amendments being proposed to strengthen the NEC and to take away some powers from the presidency, which might not be a very good thing for Cyril Ramaphosa given that top 6.
You know, this is why when you have a crisis that is based on a personality, you then propose institutional change. And this is where the problem is, because, and it's the same thing within the country, by the way, at the country level. There are those people who are saying that the president has got a lot of power. And my view has always been that, look, if you South Africans can't get it right in electing your president for this time or whatever time, does it mean that now you are going to take the powers of the president? What if you stumble upon a good one? Are you going to also do the same thing and reinstitutionalize back and give that? It is the same frustration within the ANC where I think that there just might be effort to try to constrain the power of the president. But it will look suspicious now, because we know that if you look at the power balance, the people who seems to be well vested within the party, the people who are grounded when it comes to the branches and so forth, I'm not going to say much about their integrity. We're focusing on how they are being grounded within the party. Those people, I think, they might have sinister motive to try to constrain the president of the ANC. And the suspicion will be that because Mr. Ramaphosa seems not to have a very good connection and basis within the party, this is just first step to try to constrain his power. I think those, a context exists here, and we should not shy away from it.
I mean, no doubt, one of the first things that NEC will have to discuss is, what do we do with South Africa's president Jacob Zuma.
Yeah, hey. The so-called delinquent president, as some people call him, that's a big task. From my understanding, that conversation has to come up in plenary. They have to decide whether or not they're going to task the NEC with discussing President Jacob Zuma's future. They have to discuss whether they want to see him delivering the State of the Nation in February. They've got to have lots of conversations and discussions about President Jacob Zuma. Does he go? Does the speaker become an interim president? What must happen? There haven't been lots of discussions there because they've been so focused on who must lead them. But they actually, before they leave today,
They must say
must
something.
sit and discuss their president, or rather, the president of the republic.
If it happens at plenary, Ralph, that will definitely give Cyril Ramaphosa some muscle, especially if it says Zuma must go.
Exactly. Remember, the question of President Jacob Zuma's leadership has never been dealt widely in a forum such as this. So it will be very interesting, even for us as a nation, to get to see how ANC members, when they are together, without being told what to say and just responding to this question, just to hear how do they feel about President Jacob Zuma. Branches have been managed separately to deal with the leadership where resistance has been quelled in certain areas. But now it will just be very important because South Africans have never seen ANC members in such a forum, a big platform such as this, actually discussing this. But Matlati, I don't think the President Jacob Zuma issue is as much a crisis as we are making it to be.
Really?
I think that he likes to have tea. You've seen him having many cups of tea. If they make him a nice cup of tea and ask him to leave, I don't think he's going to resist.
But it is that tea that is the
I don't
big
think
question.
he's
I
going
want
to
us to,
resist.
we will talk about what should be in that tea. Which tea should
Hi,
it be?
Matanzi, what are you
Chamomile, rose, rooibos.
Nice cup of chamomile or
Nice cup of chamomile.
But of course, we want to, hear from you. If you are on Twitter, please find us on News 24. But we've also been tracking some of your tweets for the lighter side of conference because, as much as you have been outside, we are calling it this jail of ours, Nazareth, for the journalists. You have been out there seeing possibly a lot more than we have been able to see. So we've been tracking some of your tweets, and now we've got Chester Missing, who has graced us here at the Nazareth Conference Center. And he says, Ace Makhashule is now the Secretary General of the ANC. Ace ran a dairy farm for the Guptas. He literally milked it for the Guptas.
But I hear that there was no milk involved. That's just one thing here. You see, the milking that doesn't involve any milk at all. So there was never full cream involved in this case.
No
It
full
was
cream
money
from the farm.
laundering and so forth.
Yeah.
I love how all of that is a joke. The fact that they've done so much is hilarious.
Oh, okay. And then there's another one. It's all about Ace, by the way. Ace Makhashule basically invented state capture. LMAO. It's
Laughing,
This
man.
was Free State.
Yeah,
Exactly.
People in the Free
Gotta
State
do
know
with the
about
state.
Ace.
Yeah, it's got to do with the state. So we're loving all of these tweets that we're getting from you. I mean, if you want to tweet us, please find us on News 24. Advocate Barry Roo, parody account, of course. On behalf of the Free State, I would love to apologize to South Africa for giving you Ace Makhashule.
Feels like a tough time ahead for the country, for the media, for all of us.
And I mean, Sidi, I know that apparently when he was announced the Secretary General, there was like, what? From the journalists, because this is the man we're going to have to deal with now.
Journalists were shocked. Journalists were in absolute shock. I mean, we know about Ace. I've covered the Free State at length. I know what it's like when I write a story they don't like about the Free State. My phone doesn't stop ringing. The screams don't stop. So I don't know how they're going to deal with us at national level. And I always say to them, you made it just one single journalist. What are you going to do with all of us?
All of us. Now there's Simpuam Mandlesilo, and he says, Senzo Mtkunu must just slaughter a goat or get holy water from Mboro or holy doom or diesel. He lost his post in KwaZulu-Natal through a fraudulent process, and he lost in Nazareth through another possible fraudulent process. Of course, this is in reference to the 2015 KwaZulu-Natal elective conference that has been set aside.
Probably
Ralph.
they had to stop him to say that, for this position of secretary, that we know you have a history of winning against injustice. Stop it this time. Can we have Magashule continue as the president? Do you
He
mind?
has a
this
history
time?
of winning against injustice.
You know?
I'm sure Senzo's going to come up, guys, at a later stage in a position, ministerial or otherwise. I'm pretty sure they'll make it up to him. If
They really have
indeed, if indeed fraud did occur, if indeed Ace Magashule is not legitimate.
One of our journalists, Amanda Koza, called me earlier and says this is just like deja vu when she compares it to the KwaZulu-Natal elective conference. And then here's another one from Kaisa Boy. During the ANC 54, I noted how many men were criticized based on function and women based on looks.
Really?
That is sad, but I haven't really come across
I don't
that.
think so. I don't agree with that at all.
I haven't been looking around, maybe. I don't know what
I haven't
happened.
heard it. I haven't heard it in our reports in the commentary.
Yeah.
I don't think Aisa Boy is correct. I think the women, and I'm going to take it back to Lindiwe Sisulu, at some point complaining about how she was getting attacked because of her last name. And she said, only I get attacked. And I said to her, no. Ngozana Dlamini Zuma. She's taking more heat than you by her link to her former partner, former husband. So you can't say you're just the only one attacked. So there was that attack, but it had nothing to do with looks. I don't remember anybody saying Ngozana Dlamini Zuma looks a certain way. Thus we judge her from that. Not at all.
Of course, yesterday we also got an opportunity to hear the new ANC president, Cyril Ramaphosa, after he did his walkabout. And, you know, as we titled it, he was flashing some cash around.
I felt so great. It's unusual for a new president to come and support you instantly. Yeah, he bought a shirt and some CDs, even a DVD.
Back pocket, but we know that those pockets are way, way deeper than 400 rand.
You know what, it goes back when he became the deputy president in Mangaung. He bought Magwinya in a taxi ranking. You remember there was after that conference, they went there, did some walk.
Also, that's his style.
He bought Magwinya there, so it looks like it's gonna be, you know. But President Jacob Zuma is the one who started the whole thing.
But he wasn't buying. He just took
No,
that
just did a
money and
walkabout.
gave a random.
Oh yes, this is very
He
interesting.
was on a bus, so he was testing the public transport system.
Yeah, but he gives money at random. There's a gentleman, I remember
But
a
this
youth
is very
event.
interesting. Maybe this could be telling about their approach to the exchange and economics. With President Jacob Zuma,
Oh
things are
my
not being
goodness.
done. No, but look at this.
Yeah.
It is look at the value
It
system.
works,
I'm
you're
taking
correct.
400 rand and I'm taking that. With President Jacob Zuma, there is no relationship between a fair exchange. I just give and I take
give,
randomly
take
and all that.
There's
It's the approach there.
Nobody ever gives money without expecting anything back. Yeah.
The one thing I did really like about that particular video, two things, or found interesting, let me not say like, found interesting. I like the one aspect, the vendor and what he said, saying it's very unusual for a president to come out and just support us like this. I think that's really wonderful, and if that's who he's going to be, then he's going to make a good president for the party, and I think that's good. And I found it interesting that there's merchandise with his face already that's there. You know the rule about how they want only the face of the president, so they couldn't have this merchandise all over the conference. It couldn't be seen. And then suddenly he's president, and hours later, a day later, there's fresh merchandise with the 14th president of the ANC.
That is our understanding, demand and supply. But let's get back to the serious stuff, as Ralph. It is going to be his first address, or when he closes conference, whenever that is. I mean, that has to set the tone for the term. What do you want him, what do you expect him to say, given the challenges that the ANC is facing?
I think we do have a glimpse. We've had a glimpse of what he's likely to talk about. When he did that walkabout, he talked about unity. And, you know, this is the president who does not necessarily need a spokesperson for that matter. He can speak for himself, and I think that it has to be the tone of unity. But most importantly, let's be realistic, Mahlat. They have to get to work. They have to go out there and tell ANC branches who they are, as this. They've got, it is such a controversial top 6 that they have to go and try to inspire confidence. And I think we are going to start to see that coming out. And I think I'm expecting to hear him talking much about this power being in the branches, actually, to say that don't just look at us upon as the top 6. We're supposed to get a mandate from you. He has to sell Ace Magashule as well with this idea of unity. There is no other way.
Before you get in there, Tidi, I mean, his campaign was around state capture. But we know that it's now complicated.
Yes.
Ace Magashule and even the
complicated.
DSG, Jesse Duarte, implicated in all of those allegations. What will he say about state capture?
I cannot wait to hear him speak today. I cannot wait for his January 8th statement. It'd be very interesting to hear what the posture is when the monkey's already on your back. In fact, the monkey's in the room with you at all times. So we wonder how he's going to take that forward. What I think would be interesting is, speaking of the traditions that need to change in the ANC, Cyril is notorious for being on time. There's certain things that Cyril himself does. And I wonder if he'll be able to have those kind of characteristics seep into the movement. Will we suddenly have an ANC that knows, that says to you, our briefing is at 12, our conference starts at 12, and start at 12? That's what I'm actually wondering about. What kind of changes will it have, his leadership on the ANC? Because part of the Cyril Ramaphosa making sure that he's cemented in the movement will have to be passing on some of his characteristics and how he's run his campaign. I remember one day they were late and it was shocking because that's unlike him. He gets to the point, he's quick, he's punchy. So it'll be interesting to see if the movement will start to emulate any of that. So little things.
I mean, Ralph, he has to say something about state capture. That has been central to his campaign. If he doesn't, what would that say?
Well, the thing is that this top six, this liability comrades that he's with there, comrades who have liability, people are going to be looking as to whether he's moderating. And I think he's a diplomat, he's a lawyer, so he knows how to speak without saying anything.
That he does very
well. So I think he's going to try to spin, and I think journalists are not going to bite because people want clear commitment. All he has to do is to give a sense as to how he's going to tackle this. Those two people that he's going to serve with, if state capture investigation goes ahead, you're going to have to bring in the Secretary General. The Secretary General will have to testify. Possibly the Deputy Secretary General will have to testify in the commission. You cannot have it without that. But here is a problem, Matlat. You cannot undertake full state capture investigation without bringing the ANC on trial. This is the problem that he has.
And I've raised this so many times to say you're going to the 2019 elections when all of if the commission actually happens, you're going to have all of these things playing out in the open. And what does that do for the ANC image that is already in tatters?
And for me, it is just quickly, it's the same as President Jacob Zuma. You cannot investigate President Jacob Zuma fully without putting the NC on trial as well. That's the dilemma he's going to deal with.
My issue with state capture is that you cannot also go to the elections without doing anything about it. It's a cloud where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And the elections are about 16 months away, so they're not that far away. They need to make a commitment to something. They cannot afford to go to the elections with an unanswered question. Imagine what that does for the DA, what that does for the EFF. It helps all the opposition. It arms the opposition. He needs to make a decision about state capture and make sure it happens urgently.
We are quickly running out of time, but I wanted us to remember a moment in 2007. President Jacob Zuma calling Thabo Mbeki, my brother, my comrade, and only 8 months later to recall him. What does Cyril say about Jacob Zuma?
Unfortunately, given the power balance within the party, Cyril will have to rewrite every statement about Zuma. He'll have to edit it a few times before he reads it out. Because if he goes too far, one thing about President Jacob Zuma, he might have done bad things. He has done bad things, no doubt about it. State capture, we need that. He's not an idiot. He understands the power balance within the party. You can't go after him directly. It's a political suicide for Cyril if he tries to do that.
He's got to be careful about President Jacob Zuma. I've always said, I know how people feel about President Jacob Zuma, but the one thing I've admired about him is that he's a master strategist. And he understands the ANC so well. He might fail at governance, but he doesn't fail here. He understands the political party. He understands how to shift the chess pieces and what to do and how to maneuver around each and everybody. I agree with Ralph saying Cyril cannot be directly going for President Jacob Zuma. He'll be sorry if he does that. He's got to think hard. He's got to strategize. That's the only way to outmaneuver him. Think survivor. That's what Cyril's got to do when it comes to dealing with President Jacob Zuma.
Survivor, Cyril Ramaphosa.
Survivor ANC.
Of course, one of the things that this National Elective Conference said to us is that we're going to have to see some new faces. Some of them I'm quite sad to see go. I mean, I had quite an interesting relationship with the Secretary General, Gwede Mantashe. So many late calls where he calls you and shouts because he doesn't agree with you. But one of the things that I have really enjoyed with him was that he was very accessible. And, you know, even if he disagreed with you, he will give you an answer. And one of those other people for me was Zizi Kodwa, who is the spokesperson of the ANC, but we're expecting him to step down. Tidi Madia asked him earlier, where to from now?
Maybe let me ask you this, what happens next for you?
Well, I think I will remain an ordinary activist of the African National Congress, just a branch member. I've had my good and the bad times, the highs and lows of the past 4 years, and I don't intend again to be the spokesperson of the ANC. And I'm not saying it in any negative way, but I think the good dancer knows when to leave the stage.
So they say, we're going to miss you to some extent. I'm going to miss your phone calls. I'm going to miss trying to find you and not finding you. I'm assuming you'll miss us too.
I will miss you. I mean, the guy, you don't know how much both individuals and different media houses, you have made Zizi to be who he is today. You have made a contribution. I disagreed with you, but I think the mutual respect I enjoyed so much with the media. I wish well the new spokesperson of the ANC, you can treat him or her the same way you treated me.
Advice for the new spokesperson in dealing with all of us?
Deal with the media with respect. You must always be available and never spin, just tell the truth.
Okay, thank you, Zizi.
Oh, that was funny. Zizi, just tell the truth, don't spin it, which is what he is.
That's all he does. That's the job.
That's the job, obviously. Usually how the process works is that the NEC would then appoint the new spokesperson. I think they've learned that it works better if the spokesperson is a National Executive Committee member. But one of the things that I remembered now with this dilemma that Ramaphosa has with an SG he did not want was that Thabo Mbeki didn't have a good relationship with Kgalema Motlanthe. And what he basically did was create a position called Head of Policy. It was Smuts Ngonyama. He became the face of the ANC. And we heard more from the Office of the President than we did from the Office of the Secretary General. Do you think Ramaphosa has any of those options?
I mean, Mahlatsi, as to whether you're going to see, you're going to hear much about the NC through the President's office or through the NEC, it is all about style, but it also has to do with the conditions on the ground. Ramaphosa, I think he should be very, very careful. I mean, he works within the party, no doubt about it, but also depending on how the NEC comes out, depending on his assessment of the power balance, should be very careful because he's coming through the party where there are troubles within the party. You cannot purely place too much of communication. The NEC can have communication, no doubt about it, but I'm expecting to see much more of communication from his own office, given the fact that it is also his job to rescue the ANC. And now the ANC is in trouble. He cannot put that greater platform of rescuing the ANC within the ANC itself. Of course, he will be the ANC president. But I think we should expect to see a little bit of communication around him within the presidency. Also, it is about age. You need to be very careful about the age of the communicator. It would be nice if we can get a woman, actually, because there are great women communicators to be able to do that. And I think you can get someone who can talk to younger people. We are going into 2019. Young people in South Africa have got much more interest in politics and so forth. Oppositions are beginning to field young people. Look at Makosi Koza. I've seen the spokesperson there. I think you're looking at younger people. So just don't bring too much, just don't bring an elder. It is not supposed to be a retirement platform. We're going to miss this indeed. Youthful, energetic, and accessible, can square up to the opposition party, your EFFs of the world, and so forth. So you need someone along those lines. But it would be great if Ramaphosa can find a woman as a spokesperson. That would be great.
Zizi was accessible. Even when he found himself with very little to say, but he was always there.
And I think, Matlatsi, you and I would appreciate a call from Zizi. Zizi would call you all the time. And if you and Zizi had a conversation about a story, and maybe you didn't do it, Zizi would hound you. Be like, but I called you this morning, I spoke to you. And you go, Zizi, it's not a priority story today. You know, you'd argue about it. He was passionate, he was accessible. So we're going to miss that. We're going to miss all of that. And a spokesperson who cared about the job, was given a task, knew where to go in the media to get the message populated. And if you failed him, he knew how to come after you to debate his piece. So we're going to miss that. And we need, as Ralph was saying, I'm not too bothered about the gender or not, the gender aspect. I do think it's important to feel more women in positions. What I'd like is a spokesperson who's accessible, who's energetic. Those things are important to us. If you're accessible and energetic, then we're keen to work with you, and it's easier to work with you. And you get to do your job of spin, we get to do our job of dissecting it. It makes it so much easier.
That is very true. Of course, journalists here wondering who will be the new spokesperson of the ANC. We are on day 5 of the National Elective Conference. We are quickly running out of time, but I just thought I could ask you very quickly, your moment for the conference, City?
Yo, what a question.
You can come back to that in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Ralph, does one come to you quite quickly?
Misinformation by NC members from either camp. Amazing. They have learned so much.
My moment was actually plenary. Watching those faces, waiting for the results, and then seeing the results and watching the reactions. It's the body language. There's nothing greater in politics. People can say one thing, but the bodies are saying something completely different. And the crowds and the singing. Oh my gosh!
I wanted
the
to say the songs for me were my moments. I mean, ANC delegates are really, really good in terms
So
of coming up
creative.
with a song that speaks to the moment, the crisis of the party, and all of that. But of course, it's not over yet from us. We are closing this session of our special edition of Polotiki. Joining me was our News 24 journalist, political journalist, Sidi Madia, and our resident analyst, Ralph Mateja. My name is Mahlatse Mahlasi. Continue watching us on News 24 because we will be bringing you more from the ANC Elective Conference.